All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for yet another episode of Dent Mint Podcast. We have with us Dr. Milad Auji. I hope I said that correctly. I should have asked you. We have with us, of course, Masood, my colleague, myself, and our special guest, Mr. Craig Out. I believe I said that correctly. I hope I said that correctly, but pleasure,
I'm
pleasure,
here to get all the
pleasure.
letters in there, man. I'm happy.
Fantastic having you here, Craig. I want to give a little bit of an intro in terms of, I'm in terms of who you are, what you've done. You were the CEO to All Solutions Consulting, of course. You're also the fractional COO to our Thrive. If you want to do a quick 20 seconds or 1 minute long in terms of who you are, go for it. Let's hear.
My background is in professional communication and consulting work, and so I've been doing that for, between both 8-9 years. And so I've had my own consulting firm for about 5 years now. Worked in dental specific businesses, at least 3. I and have gotten the opportunity to work with probably 150 businesses plus at this point, dozens of executives, VPs, director level, C-suite owners, and so I'm passionate about seeing people do leadership and communication really well, as well as organizational development.
Awesome. Appreciate that intro. That's awesome. All right. And we could go and jump in. Maybe I'll ask the first question, actually. I think that'll, and then we can kind of go around the table. How's that?
For
Let's do that.
sure. Let's do it.
All right. So, you're passionate about leadership. And about mentorship as well. I want to kind of ask a question in terms of you. How would you prepare? How do you prepare to kind of lead a team with a diverse set of jobs, responsibilities? Maybe even some that you aren't really, familiar with.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that, Hossein. I think one of the things that people, especially if they're newer to leadership, they struggle with, and they kind of want to show this like high level of competency in all these different areas, even if they don't have it. So even if I don't really understand your job, I'm going to try to act like I do. And I think it's a big mistake. And I think something that it can do is it can kind of steal away the actual knowledge and authority of the person that may be working underneath you, but they have their own level of expertise. And so one of the best things that you can do is bring a sense of humility every single time to people that are experts at things that maybe you're not an expert at, and to let them be the expert in those conversations. Enough core competency to communicate in their language. I think that's the job of the leader, is to be able to speak the language of the person they're communicating with, but to let them carry the expertise and not try to override it or to show yourself as more competent in their area than they are. I think that's silly. And so I think being really humble and empowering people to do what they do well is the best thing you can do when you have people of diverse positions, diverse skill sets that you're not the expert. And I think that helps so much when you get started. It creates a better relationship and a better foundation from day one.
Interesting. Which means, from day one, that's it. That's the key. It's also being able to find those people, the right people. So that kind of leads on to the next question of how do you find those people? How do you interview to find the right candidate, the right person with the right skill set, but also, for knowing who to actually place in that pivotal, position. How do you find those people?
Question. And Milad, I know that you guys are all business owners and you're entrepreneurs, and this is something every entrepreneur and every leader has to go through at some point, because especially at the birth of a business, whoever you bring in first is really the scaffolding to the walls and to the city that you're about to create, the empire that you're making. And so if you don't have the right people in there to help you build, it's going to be extremely painful. It's so painful because every dollar invested in the wrong person feels exponentially worse. I think one of the first things you're trying to do is there are 3 things I learned from a mentor of mine a long time ago that can be very helpful. Do you trust this person to build a team or to manage systems? If you don't trust them to be able to build a team or manage systems, whether that means they're hiring people or whether that means they are working alongside other people toward a common goal and purpose, you got to be able to go, I believe in this person to carry this thing forward, to believe they actually will take ownership of it, that they're going to be the ones who perceive themselves as responsible for its success or failure. 2, is, are they a person of character? You're not sure, maybe they're super talented, but if you're not sure that this person isn't going to steal from you or gossip about your other coworkers or employees, if you're not sure, then you're going to have other types of problems. And then you can sometimes end up in what I consider a golden cage, because it's like, wow, they produce so much, but I don't really love doing this, which kind of leads to the third and most important quality is, do you also like working with them? You don't want to pick up the phone and call them because you need to talk to them because you're like, oh, I'm talking to this person, I don't want to do this. It doesn't matter if they're talented, it doesn't matter if they character. If you don't want to communicate with them, you're going to have problems. So even just those three things, if you feel through, okay, can I enjoy working with this person? Do I trust them with my business to carry the team or the systems or whatever they're responsible over? And do I trust them as a human being? Can I have confidence in them? I think those are three really easy attributes that aren't overly technical in selecting staff. One is looking, right, for resources around this. Lencioni has a really good book called The Ideal Team Player, which also has a really nice framework that basically someone's hungry, humble, and smart. Are they ambitious in their own role? Do they want to grow, learn more, push forward, make things better, constantly improving? Humble, kind of as mentioned before, where they don't see anyone in any role as worse or better than them. Like, how would they treat the secretary somewhere else, right? Maybe you're looking for an associate doctor. Okay, how are they going to treat your front office? Are they going to treat them like shit? Hey, doesn't matter how talented they are. If you don't treat other people with dignity and respect, you're going to have problems. Do they have humility in the way they are humble with other people? And smart isn't just raw intelligence, it's common sense. Like, don't do stupid stuff, right? Like, if someone does that, that's also something that's a common frustration for leaders, doctors, business owners. When people do things and you go, man, if you just thought about this for 5 seconds, you probably wouldn't have done that. Like, that was just
Right.
like, I don't know if you guys, have you guys had any experiences like that where you've had team members, contractors, employees, front office staff, where it's like, if you'd have used your brain, this shouldn't be a problem, right? Like, this shouldn't be a problem. And so hungry, humble, smart, those are both some easy frameworks that are very helpful. And if what's interesting too, if someone goes through the book and if they read it and they actually get to see it, they show what problems you have. If someone only has two and they're missing one, they show what problems they are. Maybe they're ambitious and maybe they're smart, but if they're not humble, then you're going to get this person that everyone else in your team hates to work with because they think they're better than other people. And so it just breaks this down. And it's really hard to recognize these people. You're like, I've worked with someone like that before. I know what that's like. And I don't want to go through that again. So I think those are some things. I don't know about you guys. Have you guys had any experiences where, oh, I do want this in the future and I don't want this in the future? James?
Yeah, I'd probably deal with that on the day in, day out. Well, like you were mentioning, it's like I always say, like, in a team environment, you always have that one person that is you're always questioning their thinking process and how they do things. And like you mentioned, man, you just don't know where their mindset is and where they're at. And that's where the challenges arise and it causes a lot of issue in the environment. You do your best to keep the environment healthy, but it's always that one person that, like you mentioned, it just makes you wonder. You're like, why did you not think before you act? And I always have that question in mind. It's like, I'm like, please stop and think before you act, because that can cause a lot of problems. So I think that's a great point that you're making from that perspective, for sure.
And also one more thing I could probably add there. So many times, like, I found myself that I dedicate someone to something that they're not the right fit for, but they would be the right fit for many other things. So it's important to be able to, with people, pivot your way. And if they're not doing a good job somewhere, try to still give them a chance to prove themselves in other areas. I think that's a very important thing I learned by experience, but it's good for people to basically, if they are managing a team or something, to basically look into that, because so many times we really don't know before we work with someone for, many years, we don't really know their true potentials.
Yeah, I think a lot of time it has to do with really, like, anytime I go into a new practice and start working, I take the time to really understand every individual as a person and really understand where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. And based on that, it really helped me to be able to determine, hey, is this person going to have enough strength to do this task that I want them to do before me actually assigning them that task. So I think having that early conversation and really understanding every individual, I think is really important building the team. Because if you're not having those conversations and you're just going in and you try to implant certain changes, it makes it very difficult.
I think too, I love both what you said. It's every person is the right fit for the right seat on the bus, but they may fit somewhere on some seat on the bus. Someone's strengths is so crucial to your success and their success. Because, Gallup did a study. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Strengths Finder concept and process, but they did a study that if people are utilizing their strengths on a regular basis, maybe on a daily basis, they're 98% or 97% more engaged with their work. I don't know who doesn't want that. Like, I mean, one person's like, yeah, I hate when my team's engaged in their work and they're, enjoying their job and, they actually care about it. I hate that. So I think any person that wants to be a manager or leader, which I define, they're kind of different things, but there is a huge lift in taking the time to learn about people. And most people aren't willing to do it. They're not willing to take the time to have the crucial conversations, to know what people's dreams are, what they care about, their previous experiences. And because of that, their business suffers, or their product line suffers, or their services suffer, right? Or the close rate suffers. It translates to everything. And so that's
Yeah.
wins. Just taking time to know people. Sorry, Masood, go ahead.
No, I was just going to compliment what you said. A team, I mean, the way I see it is pretty much like a system, just like a machine that has different parts to it. If the machine is not working well, suppose that a team is a car and then the car is broken and it's not working. In order for you to be able to fix it, you have to know the specific parts. Like if the engine is not working, you have to exactly know how the engine works. And maybe it's not even, maybe someone has put a I can't come up with a good example, but maybe someone has put a brake pad in place of an engine and then it's like the car is not running. You know what I mean? People are made for different things. And in order for you to fix that machine, that system, you have to exactly know how each of them work and what they are built for.
Absolutely.
Your point.
Let me ask you guys this. Do you guys assess the right fit for someone when they're coming into your organization?
I think for me, when I look at somebody, if they're right fit or not, I really pay attention to their attitude towards their approach to even doing the interview.
Note
I
that,
think,
hey, everyone pause, attitude. All right.
yeah, I think the attitude is it's so important, when they walk in, their body language, are you engaged in, what we're trying to do? And I always tell people, I'm like, I always want to, when I went through dental school interviews, they ask you a lot of questions around what the school stands for. So they want to know if you've done a little bit of a research on what the mission statement of that school is or what their vision is. A lot of time, when I talk to people or I interview people or whatever the case may be, I always see if they've done a little bit of research. So I dig deep into the vision of the company and see if they're truly done their research and if their vision really aligns with what we're trying to do. So I think that's also important. So the attitude, and if they can share the similar vision as what you're trying to do. And if both of those don't fit for me, I'm like, that's probably not the right person for what I'm trying to accomplish, because that's going to it's like a downward effect, right? So you're soon going to find out, oh man, this was not the right fit for what I'm trying to do.
A while back, I was part of the IT Glue team, and one of the big factors we had were these core values of the company. There were 7, and everybody had to know them because we lived them on a daily basis. And during our hyper growth phase, we grew by a head count of roughly 30 to 40 people per year. So it was very quick. It was a lot. And these were very much necessary, needed roles. And we would hire for attitude. We tried hiring, these university graduates, and they just didn't know how to work with a team. They knew the technical side really well, but they just couldn't. And we would hire for the skill or hire for the attitude and train for the skill. We were willing to train that person and bring him up because they had the right attitude. They were adaptable. They showed initiative. They their engagement and enthusiasm and willing to actually take that initiative and collaborate with the team members, versus some of the most academic recruits. And it was a challenge working with them. I mean, I remember we went through multiple different technical writers with one of our teams, and it was a challenge. It was a challenge working with some of those individuals, but they were exceptionally talented. They were very, very talented. It's just, not as easy to work with. Yeah, I very much firmly believe, hire for the attitude, train for the skill.
That too. One of my favorite books, this might be my actual single favorite book on leadership, called The Way of the Shepherd by Pentak. Super short, thin, it's executable. One of the things that it says that I have just like grabbed onto and held onto forever, you can't fix a bad attitude. It's actually impossible. I don't mean someone came in and they like, I stubbed my toe earlier and like, probably cursed and was on the call with the client. That's not what I mean. I don't mean like having a momentary situational, effect that's causing someone to not feel well. I don't know, if their cat died. People can feel sad. That's acceptable. But attitude toward the organization that's negative for themselves, negative disposition toward the goals, the vision, can't fix it. You cannot fix it. Like you can't. Either choose to not or they leave. Those are the only options. You don't put up with a bad attitude because it will poison your organization. I love that you chose not to even deal with that. Like you're like, no, like we hire people that this will never be a problem. This isn't a problem. I don't care. I will teach them the skills. But it makes sense, right? Because you can't fix that. That's the thing that's the most important to have from day one.
True.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Absolutely. One more thing that just, came up to my mind right now, besides the personality, there was this video that I was seeing from basically this hiring manager that she was hiring for sales roles. And she was saying that I only hire the guys or girls with the hot partner because they are the people that know exactly how to close. I don't know if that's a good example.
That's the best I've ever heard. Can you imagine a guy? I struggle to, I'm struggling today. It's like, oh, get out of here, loser. Like, it's my thing. You can't even tell yourself. Hilarious. That's so funny.
That's
Yeah, but
funny,
it's true. It's true.
Powerful.
Like she was saying,
It
they are
is.
the kind of people that like they are the kind of guys that know how to close something, how to close
Sure.
a girl.
For
So if they
sure.
are successful in other areas of their life, pretty much translates to that. And so many things that we do on everyday basis, they can translate to the things that we do in a company, in different things that we have to take
Hey,
care of.
that's a good trick. From now on, whoever walks up, be like, Susan, can you bring your girlfriend or boyfriend? I have to see first before I hire you.
Number one in an
Are
interview.
you interested? Then you're already good, right? You know that you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's interesting stuff. It's
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
I was going to say it kind of leads on to the next question, which is how do you know when it's really time to let somebody actually go?
Check their partner, apparently. So they
They don't even join at that point.
it's like, oh,
Like
you
they
solve most
died.
people's problems. It's so easy.
Yeah.
I think this is something that almost every leader that I work with, they struggle so much with this. I'm gonna give like the clearest, best answer ever that I found to be true and consistent across so many different levels, by the way, of business. This answer works whether you're talking about a VP level individual, whether you're talking about an associate doctor, whether you're talking about someone that's running the front desk, hygienist. This is the same. Okay. Goal is to create a system of standards so clear that represent what the organization, not the individual. Someone note this. Whoever's watching this right now, put this down because this is where the problems happen. People go, I'm having a problem with this person in my organization and I want to let them go. But I feel like I haven't given them enough chances, or I feel like I am being not prejudiced toward them, but because of maybe my relationship with them or how this has gone, or because of this other person's relationship. And so I'm not sure, do I just want to let them go? Are they actually underperforming, having problems? I don't know. And this is the freaking mindset I've seen over and over and over and over and over again. I've had 2 conversations of this in the last week with different organizations. Same thing. Okay, so here's what you do. You make sure that your organization, these standards, this job, expected to perform. And then people through their actions will tell you want to work there or not. And clearly communicated these things. These are the expectations of you. What I've seen is like, hey, you haven't really been doing, or it doesn't seem like, I don't know if you don't want to, or if you're not able to, but communicating to me that you don't want to work here. Like you're making that choice that the way that this role is set up isn't the best fit for you. And I want to acknowledge what you've been doing and how it's been going and the effort you've been putting in, that this isn't a good fit. And that's how you know, because they don't actually do the thing that is what your organization says this role is supposed to do. And that's how you know when it's time for them to go. The system works them out of your organization.
Interesting.
System.
Yeah, I mean, like just add on to that too. It's like a lot of time I feel like I get to a place where it's not frustration, but it's about, I always ask myself, like, okay, so somebody does something multiple of time and you always give them that feedback and you're like, okay, hey, I'm giving you this feedback. And by giving you this feedback, I'm giving you an opportunity to improve on what the mistakes that you're doing. And when I see somebody that really not applying that feedback, that's where I'm just like,
Telling you,
they're
telling you to work there. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And every problem in every organization always comes down to one of three things. So this is like a Craig special. This is not from a book. This is my brain. The Craig special.
Craig's a special. There we go.
Right? Systems, training, or personnel. Every problem is only one of those three things. Every time, 100% of the time, it will always boil down to those things. They're a failure in your systems, set up correctly. They're not robust enough. There's not enough exceptions built in for them, whatever. Training, maybe you have the systems, but not well communicated. They're not delivered in such a way that someone knows what to do with them, or they're not trained for the role. They don't know what their expectations are. They don't know how to communicate with you. You've not appropriately delegated power and authority for the role. Training issues. Or if your systems are right, your training has been there and it's been consistent, it's a personnel problem. They're the wrong person. They are not able to do the role. And that's every problem. Every single problem will come down to one of these three things every time.
So Craig, going back, I just kind of like, now we talked about the personnel, and I've seen that in some organization that I personally worked for, and I just kind of wanted to go back to that. Do you think that sometimes it could be the issue with the leadership that's the problem and not the staff? And how do you go back and able to identify where the real issue is coming from? Because sometimes it may be just the leadership and the way the leadership is kind of working, and they may not really set you up for the success, and you're not succeeding because of the lack of leadership within that organization. So as a personnel, how do you?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So how do you identify that?
Like this is a great example. So common problem of why do people fail? That should be like a whole podcast, right? Like, why do people fail in their roles? The number one reasons I see. So leadership to me is a delegation of two things. There's a lot of frameworks for determining it, but this is like what your role is and what you're passing down in a really simple context. Delegating power and authority. Power is the ability to do something, and authority is the right to do something. So for instance, you have an office manager, right, in your organization. That is their title. Their authority is, in theory, what is an office manager, that these people are beneath them, okay? That they have the ability to make these calls. Let's say they know how much of a discount they can give, right, et cetera. Power is the ability to execute the role. For instance, let's say you have an office manager, but they aren't allowed to use their credit card to buy one single thing for the office without your approval. Not have the power to buy the Germex. They have to ask you for it. You have held on to the power while handing over the authority. A million versions of this that cripples people in their roles. And then they don't do the thing that you wanted them to do. And so then you think they're not good at their job. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth. Or leaders fail to communicate and then they get frustrated with you because they didn't communicate clear expectations and they didn't actually fully hand over the thing. Like, imagine you're passing a ball, right? And if I'm like passing the ball, but I kind of never let go of it, and they're grabbing on, they're like, all right, like let me have it. And then let's say you're playing basketball and they're like, oh, you didn't score a basket. It's like, you didn't fully give me the ball to be able to shoot. How can I score? It's impossible. And this happens all the time with employees, all the time. Or with leadership, they pass the ball. Maybe they even do a decent job delegating power and authority. Zero development. Teach, model, coach. Teaching is an exchange of information. Modeling is me showing you through my actions what it is my expectations of you are. Like, I'm going to do it with you. Like, we're going to do it together so you can see what this looks like. And then coaching is you doing something, and then I'm going to give you feedback. A lot of people get set up in their roles. Maybe the delegation of power and authority is good. Maybe it's not. People do sort of some version of teaching. They usually do zero modeling. They give really critical feedback, not very helpful feedback as coaching. This is the average paradigm for leadership. And this is when you have leadership problems, that just gets exponentially worse. Blame. It becomes a mess because how do you know whose fault it is? Be able to go dig really deep into the organization and see, it's like, hey, well, what did you do? And these are questions I work with clients on. It's like, hey, you said this person isn't doing a good job. Explain to me what their role is. Sometimes they can't super clearly. It's like, what did you tell them their job is when they came? What did you explain to them? This is what their purview of responsibility is. I don't know, but we've talked about it at some point, and it kind of never really got it, and so I don't know. I've still been doing it. It's like, this is your fault. This is still on you. There has to be conversations of ownership.
I think there's so much in what you just said, Craig. I mean, firstly, the authority and power. I think when you give someone authority but not the power, you're basically just questioning your own leadership skills, because like you're telling them do this, but you don't trust them to do this. But in the first place, if you didn't trust them to do this, then why did you tell them? Right? So that in its own is a problem with you, not them. With all, I think, I mean, in my opinion, I think leader is really an engineer. It's just a people engineer. He just has to make sure that he puts the right people in right places and gives them the right authority and right powers that they need. Just like, in the example of a car that I just told you. Like, in very rare cases, it comes to the fact that the engine that person is using for that car is weak. In so many times, like the engine could be put in the wrong place. Or like the engine could be put in the right place, but you don't allow it to run. You don't give it oil. Like, you know what I mean? So I think you're right. So many cases, it comes down to leadership than really the employee who's trying to do something.
Yep.
That's definitely, in the world of dentistry, we deal with that all day, where there's so many different issues in the organizations, and you see it, and you always ask yourself, like, how can I resolve it? Is it the personnel? Is it the leadership? Is it the training? Is like, where is that disconnect is? And every time you try to like dig deep and figure it out, it requires a lot of time, a lot of energy that sometimes it can be, exactly. It becomes,
as a doctor, where do you see this happening most common with what roles in the office and the dental practice?
I think that a lot of it comes down to the management, especially on a bigger organizational scale, because there's so many people involved. And again, if everybody doesn't know what their roles are and doesn't know exactly, if they're not trained well around their role, then it becomes, because everybody have their own opinion and you try to respect those opinions, and it makes it very difficult if everybody doesn't know that this is your lane and you have to stay in it. It makes it very complex, especially for doctors, because then you are essentially trying to manage the patient, manage the staff, and manage everybody else. And if there is a disconnect in the upper management down, it just makes it so hard sometimes to be able to figure out exactly what the issues are. And the majority of the time, it causes a lot of frustration trying to figure out, hey, how do I go back and figure out what was wrong? But yeah, a lot of time, like I said, just the management side of things, because it's just so many people are involved in what you're trying to do sometimes, that it makes it complex in a sense when you're trying to go through your day to day, especially when there's so many hands are involved in what you're trying to do sometimes. That can make things complex. Other than that, like I said, majority of the time on the office level, I try my best to keep everything to the office level and nothing more than that, because then I'm able to control what's going on. Unless I have to seek them help, I try to be very like, hey, let's resolve it here before you go somewhere else, because then you're just kind of centralizing the issue and you can resolve it rather than involving 10, 15, 20 people. And then it becomes so hard to try to figure those things out. And I think that, if I urge my other colleague in dentistry, do the same thing, just centralize your problem, focus on what the problem is and come up with the solution before you kind of step out of and try to figure it out with somebody else. Because when you bring too many chefs in the kitchen, you're just having more problems. So
More problems. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and this is maybe an interesting question that a lot of dentists may experience, especially if they're in DSOs or if they're working across multi-practice organization. Do you feel like there's a lot of tension in the methodologies of approach, problem solving, from people on the clinical side to people on the corporate side, like how they approach solving problems?
absolutely, absolutely. Because essentially, you have to remember, like as a general dentist, and I think that we have had this conversation to like, because you're looking at things mainly from a perspective of a patient. How can I solve this patient's problem and figure out what the patient needs are? And then along the side of that, you're trying to figure out the staffing and everything else like that. But people in the corporate, all their focus
So
is on
money, baby. I don't
exactly.
get money.
So
The Masood with this company, man. Oh, give me money.
a lot of time, yeah, a lot of time, I think the issue is just that, just trying to kind of find that balance of like, hey, look, I'm going to focus on my patient and the patient care, and then let you guys focus on everything else. But like I said, for me, my focus always is like, okay, we have our goals. I know what the goals are. I know what I need to do to get to those goals. And that's all I focus on all day long. I don't focus on anything else. And like I say, if I have a problem, I always say this to everybody. I'm like, be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. I tell this to my staff all the time. I'm like, if there is a problem, come to me with a solution. Don't come to me with the same problem.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
Then
So,
it's so easy to, and Milad, you're pointing at this. It's so easy for somebody to come and say, "This is the problem right there. That's the issue," and then you're like, "Great. What are we going to do to fix it?" Oh,
yeah.
I'm out of, I'm out of,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
come up with at least 3 potential solutions for it.
Yeah.
Let's go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it's so interesting that we were having this conversation last night, and I went back, and I think, just to kind of give a shout out, Miss Jill gave me a folder. She gave me like 13, 14 photos from 45 years of her father just collecting data. And there was a line that I read, and man, it just resonates so much with me. It said, you build leaders, the leaders are not born. And that sentence is just stuck in my head. And I was like, wow, you can turn anybody into a leader. You're not born. You may have some quality of it along the way, but you're essentially getting built. And like one of my assistants came to me today and she said, well, this patient is this patient. I said, listen, come to me and tell me, just like Jose said, I'm like, if this patient is having consistent problem, maybe the problem is us and it's not them. So come to me with the solution. Let's figure out what are we doing wrong rather than going and saying, well, here's the problem, but you're not fixing it. You're just talking about it. Right. So I'm like, just come to me, say, hey, doc, like this denture is not fitting. Okay. So what do you think? What the solution is? Forget about what should we do to fix it. Right. Why I'm doing that is because I want to urge them and I want to allow them the opportunity to become the leader within their own role. I'm like, you are a dental assistant. You have an opportunity to become a leader in your role. So be that leader. You can train. I see so many people, hygienists, they're director of the hygiene for big companies. Why? Because they took the opportunity to become that leader. They had the attitude, right? And they get assigned 50, 60 hygienists that they direct. So it's like a lot of time, like, don't take the position that you have, think that position is just a small position. It's not, because essentially you can make it something bigger. So take the opportunity to learn. I'm trying to build that leadership in them and allow them the opportunity to think rather than me giving it a solution because I didn't allow you to think about it. So,
But I think too, part of leadership's job is two things with that. One is you have to create a field of psychological safety where people feel like they can bring you solutions and not be chastised for it if they're wrong. Didn't work. You make sure they actually feel like I can fail here, but I'm going to take the ownership. Like I'm going to learn, I'm going to lean forward into it and I'm going to try and I'm going to learn and I hope it's going to work out. Or critical are you? Someone brings 2 or 3 solutions like, hey, this is something we can do. It's like, oh, it's a terrible idea. It's like, oof, like whatever you give more of, excuse me, let's see. There's a great saying from, I can't remember his name. He was a gentleman that oversaw Federal Reserve Bank for the United States during Reagan. Our whole methodology was this, once again, apolitical. I don't care how people lean. It's just what he said, and I think it's universally true. Whatever you tax will shrink, and whatever you subsidize will grow. If you're constantly nipping at, putting negative energy toward whatever, and that someone does, you're going to get less of that thing. I don't want that. That might not be your intention, but you will get less of it. And whatever you're kind of feeding, whatever you're putting more energy toward, whatever you're giving more flattery toward, whatever you're saying more positive things about, it was something was wrong. It's like, hey, you know what? We weren't able to use your solution this time, but I love that you brought me. You reinforce that, you're going to get more of it. If I'm going to bring you ideas, you better freaking reinforce the positive nature of them bringing you ideas. When they don't, it's your fault. Your fault for your level of communication.
Yeah, man.
Another interesting thing I found about criticism, and this is like, I hope this is helpful for everyone, should be specific. Your positive comments are specific and your negative comments with criticism. Here's how most people do this. Let's say you're in office and someone is filling out customer information and you're talking to them and they're not doing a very good job. They're just like kind of awkward and they're struggling through it. Their patient information. So, you know what? When they came up, you didn't really greet them. You didn't do a very good job at this. Kind of awkward. You were silent way too long. Like, I think they're pretty uncomfortable. The way you missed this detail and you get this piece of their information and you didn't fill out this report right. Specific. That's how people give feedback critically. Specific are they when it went well? Hey, you know what? You did a pretty good job over there with that person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point.
And so most people are not specific enough. It's like, hey, I love when they first walked up, you smiled at them. You said, hey, how's it going? You were very friendly and they looked like they felt super welcome. And you saw that they were struggling and filling this out. And so you asked if you could help them. Maybe they're struggling with some things from their insurance and you went above and beyond to talk them through it.
That's very cool.
So most people, when giving feedback, so what ends up happening? So most people from leadership positions speak down to the actions of their team. Is push up the actions of their team. End up getting people that are very afraid to fail, that end up hiding things from you, that end up failing and trying to spin it, make it not sound as bad because they know you're going to give super negative critical feedback, and that never feel valued for you. Talking about staffing problems. Here's how you fix staffing problems. Make people feel shitty.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? They're going to mess up. It's inevitable. Don't make them feel super shitty for messing up and then do nothing to reinforce the positive things that they do, building your company and making you filthy rich. You got to do both. Do both.
Yeah. Actually, that's something that we were just talking about last time on the same podcast, that we were basically talking about how people learn and education. And the conclusion was that failing and making mistakes is the best teacher you can find. So if you want your team to, they're not all knowing. So when they come into a job, they have to do a lot of learning. And the best way to learn is through failures, through making those mistakes. So you need to give them that ability, that allowance to basically that authority and power. So I said all the parts.
There you go.
Be able to make all those mistakes and, really learn as they go. But I also have another question from probably all of you guys. As you're building a company, as you're building a system, a structure, it becomes layered. And then later on, as you go, you have to outsource parts of your leadership to other people. Just suppose the idea of a DSO, because everyone here can relate with it, understand. Well, at first you start, you only have one office. You probably could not even have an office manager. You just handle everything yourself. But then you have two clinics. Now you need to get two office managers to handle those. And then your role is to be the leader of the two office managers. You're not dealing with the employees directly. And then as you keep building more and more and more, these things just become layered that, you'll have to trust leadership with those people. So if there's a mistake, if there's a problem within any parts of this system, how can you distinguish where the problem really starts? Because if you ask so many people, different people can point the problem at different areas. Like you go to an employee, the employee says the leadership, like the office manager is not doing it right. You go to the office manager is like the employee is pretty shitty. So how can you, as the main leader that's really trying to put this whole system together and make it work, how can you identify where the problem really is?
Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah. Such a good question, Masood. And I know, by the way, as a technical person, I think looking at something from the broader picture from a systems architecture perspective is really important. And so I'm working with a large an enterprise of 3 different companies. It's one of the groups I'm working with. Had some issues on not staffing, but on performance, specific team that no one knew where it started or ended. Was it the leadership? Was it the people at the bottom? Was it training? Was it, hey, they're not paid enough? Like there's a million things that came up as like, why is this team struggling? We've not paid enough attention to it for long enough, which this happens a lot, that we don't know. Here's what we did. Through and isolated each component of it and evaluated it individually. People and the systems and the training. Be separate and then ask those questions every direction. So looking up, down the organization, vice versa for all systems. What's working, what's not working for you? Please explain. Tell me everything about it. Tell me how you're, and part of it too, I find that people are the most honest when they're not feeling like there's an evaluation involved. So when you come in every day, like what's going on? Like tell me how it goes, like do you hang with your buddies? Like what about your job do you like, dislike? We'll always end up bringing it up. And then you kind of poke at it and prod it and you ask a little bit more and more and more. And then you go do the exact same thing over and over again with different parts of the organization. And you will inevitably find a commonality across the issues. At the time, there's also a perception. Multiple people are perceiving the same thing happening from 2 very different ways. So then you go evaluate the thing itself. So maybe that system is means of communication, cadence of communication. Find out, they feel like they're not being communicated to enough. They feel like they're getting and no one is listening. And the problem is that because of what they do, they don't check their email. So that's not an effective means of communication. That was one thing we found, which was really funny. They're like, yeah, I never have a chance to go look at it because I'm always working with my hands and doing stuff. And I'm always like front facing with clients. And so I never have time to check this. And so I always get to it too late. And hours later, they're really upset because I haven't answered this thing. And it's like, so the problem is cadence and rhythm of communication around urgency is a huge part of the problem. Super specific.
And the way that you pinpointed that problem was through anonymous surveys with individuals, like you, without having anyone evaluate them or anyone know that it was them that gave that answer. Basically,
no. I think the role of most leaders should be, whether it's within their purview, and if it gets big enough, the owner, CEO, I don't care who it is, you go deal with the biggest problem that exists in your organization. That's your job. Go freaking talk to people. Talk to people. It really came down to a person talking to people and evaluating. Some problems you can solve some issues with data, but data is more referential than explanatory. It is referencing something that's happening in reality, assuming you collected it well, whether it's data around when people get mentorship, or whether it's data around finances or how many patients are coming through, how many missed calls you have, is referential. It is not explanatory. You have to then add and go understand and interpret data to add an explanatory element to it. You could do the surveys and that can give you information and give you data, but a lot of times it's the actual personal experience required. Understand why it's happening. I think a lot of times leaders aren't willing to do that. And so then they make decisions against data, but without going and understanding the data, without going and understanding the reason behind this outcome or these series of outcomes. For instance, why are people missing calls? This is kind of your guys' world. Milad, this is also your world. Why are we missing calls? Why are we missing calls? Because the person at the front desk doesn't have time because of their workload, so they don't get to the phone. You go, oh, we need to stop missing calls. I don't care how many times you say it. If their workload doesn't change, they're not gonna stop missing calls. Like there's some point you have to go actually get why the data, what it's correlating to in reality. That is super important in how you solve more grand systems problems.
That's amazing. Craig, the one thing that I wanted to ask was, I mean, we can go out of that any angle, but the biggest things I realize in like bigger companies, it's all about like evaluating the employees, right? Every 3 months, every 6 months. Let's evaluate this person performance, see how they're doing. In your experience, do you really think that that is effective leadership for a company to say, hey, how is an employee doing by just evaluating him every 3 or 6 months? I'm always so interested to see how effective is that? Like, what is that? What is that information is giving you when you're evaluating an employee every 3 months, 6 months, every year, whatever the case may be? What do you think that is? Or what do you think they do that for?
Really good question. I think that a company's ability to grow quickly completely dependent on their ability to feedback and adjust to that feedback. For instance, Sa was the guy who basically made the Ritz-Carlton what it was. COO, but he's really the guy that carried the culture. He was his brainchild, most of it. He is the reason that you guys go to Chick-fil-A at all? You guys refer to Chick-fil-A? So they say, my pleasure because of that guy. You know what I'm saying? Like he's changed the world in many ways. He said this super interesting thing. He says, I only need 2 pieces of information to know if our business is growing or shrinking. Whoa, the Ritz-Carlton, you know from 2 pieces of information. He's, yeah, this is really easy. He goes, what are my ratings on a 1 out of 10 on average with customers? And what are my ratings on a 1 out of 10 with employees? And usually the second one influences the first one. If I can go know how my employees are doing and if they like working here and if they're happy and if they feel like they're doing a job and if they feel like the company is doing a good job for them, then they will take care of the customers and the customers will end up giving us a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and they will go be our champions in the world. Why do big corporations and organizations do so many reviews and so frequent? Because you find things out that through the layers of organizational chaos, you could say, get lost. They just get lost. There's sense. I was working with someone that works, he's in dental and he does consulting work for other dental practices. He told me a story from a long time ago. He's like, no one had talked to one of the dental assistants for like a long time and actually evaluated them and really, really asked good questions like how things are going, whatever. They found out through talking to this person that there was a huge affair going on between the dentist and one of the close friends that were also worked in the practice of this dental assistant. Because of this, everyone had this, and the dentist was a little bit of a more aggressive person. And so there's this huge fear environment at the lower levels of the staff inside of this larger organization that no one knew about. And so, of course, this practice was super suffering. It was super bad. People, it was like there's a lot of turnover and it just created this really toxic environment. And guess what? None of the people at the top and the DSO level and the organization level freaking knew it was happening. They just couldn't understand, once again, data. Why is this branch having turnover? What's the problem? Why is this like, I don't understand. It's in this great location and all these other things should show that it's going to be very successful. The doctor's very talented. I don't get it. No one knew it was happening at the level of the actual office. And so the only way someone found that out is they went and basically had a review with someone and talked through it and said, hey, how do you enjoy your work environment? And they found it terrible. And they asked why. And lo and behold,
That was
things that you will never know that don't come up through charts and through data and through like just general metrics. This is why it's really important.
And
That
that's
makes
so
total
amazing.
sense.
That's so
wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, just even thinking about it from perspective of like me as a doctor, you're saying that sometimes, I mean, I could tell, and I had a conversation with Harmeet not long ago. We did like a small podcast together, and exactly that was exactly what you point, that sometimes the dentist can create the fear in the environment that causes the staff to be uncomfortable at a time, and it can cause so much complication that you wouldn't even think about it. And that is such an interesting thing. And I mean, all of that just goes back to, I think that is the key. I think just, for me, I think this is the problem as a doctor. I mean, being a doctor, I think that's exactly why in our industry, in general, dentistry, I think this is where the staffing issue exists. I truly believe that. I think that people just come in, and I don't know if maybe the dentists are just don't have the right approach to this staffing. And I think that's essentially what's causing it. And I mean, you just point that out. And I think that's what it is, man. It's just like, I think we as dentists need to take a note on this and just say, hey, be nice to your staff so you're not going to have staff issues. That's
So
amazing.
Experience with that. And it sounds like you worked in pretty large organizations where doing jumps of the other reason is positive, right? And ideas that are living the bottom rung, quote unquote, organizationally never reach a C-suite meeting. Super obvious, intuitive, because they're the people actually doing it every day. They're like, hey, like this is really inefficient. Have we ever thought about doing this? And if the right person hears it, that has the ability to influence change this entire system, it freaking changes the organization like overnight just by having the right person deliver the right idea from level.
yeah. And I think to your point, Craig and Mila, I mean, everyone in dentistry at least knows that staffing is the biggest issue. But with what we're talking about right now, I think the biggest issue is really the leadership, not the staffing. I think
It always is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
always is.
Staffing issues, you have leadership issues.
Yeah.
Every time, every industry, I don't care what it is, you have leadership issues. That's it. Like you have leadership issues. I'm sorry. Unless there's just a gap in the market, which comes back to leadership too, right? Hey, there's not enough hygienists. I'm not saying this is it. There's not enough hygienists. No one wants to do this job anymore. We'll pay them enough. Pay them more money and more people go to school and do it, and you won't have the gap in the market. You're going to other places. Well, they're treating them better and paying them more. Like, what do you want? What do you think? You think it's magic? You think it's magic that they're just somehow like going over there and having the exact same experience and choosing to not be with you? Like, what do you think's happening over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always leadership.
So I think, Milad, I mean, no offense, but I think dentists, there just has to be a system to train them to be better leaders. You know, I'm not saying
Absolutely.
leaders. I'm just saying
No,
pretty important.
No, man, I'm telling you this, and this is, going back like full circle around. I think this is why the conversation that came to me about, what we talked about as far as like creating the platform, putting the information out, because when you transitioning out of dental school, and just remember this, not everybody that come out of dental school, they have enough life experiences. They're early on in their life. They're in their teens. All they know is schooling. They never had a job before. They don't know what a team player is. They don't know the leadership. They don't have zero management skill. So this is why we had these conversations, because essentially, if you're able to close this gap of, I'm transitioning out of dental school into the real world, how can I give you enough knowledge and understanding of how to be a team player, how to be a leadership, and how to be a people person? And those three things, if you're able to give them that information, I think dentistry within the next 10 years will get much better, because now you address the key issue that exists. I'll just say one more thing. It was 16 years ago when I decided, I was like, man, I like dentistry. I love dentistry, and I want to do dentistry. And I went to a doctor, Dr. Fasha. He has an office in Virginia. He practiced for 52 years and he retired last year. And I was shadowing him, and something happened along the way, and he pulled me to the side. He pulled me to his office. He said, Milad, if you want to become a dentist, remember this. If you're not a people person, do not get into this business, because you will fail no matter what you do. And I say this all the time. If you're not a people person, do not get into dentistry, because you have to know how to work with people, from the staff, from the patient. And unfortunately, a lot of people get into dentistry and they don't have the people person. They're not a people person. They think that they just have a drill in their hand and that's it. But they don't realize that there is this giant
line. Like, that's rough. Like,
yeah, it is. It is. They think, oh man, I'm just gonna go in, do a crown prep, and I'm gonna go home. They don't know that, dude, you gotta deal with assistants, office manager, patients, everybody, vendors, everybody. So if you don't have those skills, you're gonna fail no matter what you do. And I stand behind that 100%. Because the people that are doing it at high level, they understand that early on in their career and they're able to build upon it. It doesn't matter where you have your practice. You can be in middle of Manhattan, or you can be in an isolated town in middle of Iowa. If you don't have people personality, you're not gonna go nowhere.
Yeah,
well, I'm going to quote the famous Sarah Ruberg of our Thrive Tribe. 100%. Unicorn.
And legend.
People like to work with who they know and trust.
Yeah.
That's already true in general with everybody. That's more true if someone has a drill. You know what I mean? Like, going into this thing that I'm like afraid of doing, and I have a lot of negative perception around, and it's like everyone's worst nightmare. Like, I don't have to go to the dentist, right? If that's everyone's first thought, and you gut in and someone's like, okay, yeah, I'll get in the chair. Like, let's do this crap. You're not coming back. That is not your first choice to return. To someone who makes you feel safe and you can have a conversation with, and being a people person, man, that's game changing for retention.
For sure.
Staff and
100%.
employees, with employees
Yep.
and with patients. It's like,
Yep.
I honestly don't know how it works if you don't have that. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, just to give one small advice to any dentist, doesn't matter, you're young, seasoned, doesn't matter. I always say, like, when I have patients sit in my chair, I pull the chair right along with them, and I'm looking at them eye to eye, and I'm having that conversation with them, because I want them to know that I relate to what the issue is or what they're there, because I want them to feel that I'm trying to make that connection with them, right? Because sometimes I see dentists that just hovering over the patient and then no eye contact. You're looking over their head, and then you're not making them feel comfortable. So if you're able to sit down and be relatable and just look at them in the eye and really make that connection, I think, at least for me, I think even today, one of my patients was like, man, I can tell you're a good man. I was like, I appreciate it, because it means something, because that means I made that connection. And that's what really matters. And I do the same thing with with the staff, I'm like, hey, I have an open door policy. Just come in. Let's hash it out. If you're frustrated, talk to me. If you're upset, talk to me. If you're sad about something, talk to me. Because I want them to know that I'm there for them. And it's the same thing for the patients. Be there for your staff, be there for your patient. And have that passion, man, because the passion drives everything. If you don't have it, you're not going to succeed. So
It's great.
it's actually very interesting that, with little talks like this and, this podcast setting like this, because you get to know a lot, like you understand a lot, and you come to conclusions that you didn't know before. Like for me, myself, previously, because I've been in the dental industry for it's been 2 years. I'm not as many years as you guys, but I used to think that the staffing issue is really because of not hiring the right employees. It's mostly because, the staff are not trained well. They don't have good education programs for the staff. But now that we're talking about it, I think the dental industry really has a leadership issue. It has, instead of training the staff, we have to train the leaders, the dentists. So, I mean, it's very interesting to get to all of these conclusions.
That's good, man. I appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate it too. Well, I definitely want to say, we're coming. I don't want to hold you guys up anymore, but I truly appreciate every single one of you guys. I know you guys took time out of your day to come join me here. I always enjoy talking to all of you. I know me and Craig met on LinkedIn, and I don't know where this journey is going to take us, but I'm super excited.
I'm honored to know you
I
guys.
think
I'm a
everyone
student.
here met on LinkedIn. Like we've never had any real life exposure to each other.
This is real. This is real life. Like we're here.
Yeah.
It's considered real life. Yeah,
After
exactly.
COVID, this is
But
as real as it gets. This is how it works. Like,
Hey, you're in Mexico, they're in Canada, I'm in the US. We are all
Right.
connected. We're
That's
all
right.
connected. We're all connected. But yeah, I love it, man. Well, thank you
Absolutely.
guys so much. I really appreciate it. Well, till next time.
Definitely till next
Amazing
time. Thank
talking
you
to you.
very much, Greg.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Thank you
much.
so
gentlemen.